Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. Imagine finally escaping apartment life. Then 2 weeks after you close, the HOA president shows up uninvited and says you owe 7 years of dues on property that's been independent since the 1940s. I thought it was a scam, until I woke up to strangers mowing my land like it was theirs. Who sent them? And why? Let me start from the beginning. I work in tech consulting and had been saving for years to buy my dream property. After decades of apartment living in cramped suburbs, I wanted space, real space, privacy, somewhere I could actually breathe without hearing my neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls. When my realtor called about an off-market estate sale, I knew I had to see it. The property was a 50-acre ranch sitting right on the edge of a high-end gated community. The elderly owner had passed away, and his kids just wanted to sell quickly and divide the money. Perfect for me. The ranch was everything I had dreamed of. Rolling fields, a solid farmhouse built in the 1940s, and best of all, it was completely independent. No homeowner association fees, no rules about what color I could paint my mailbox, no committees deciding whether my grass was the right height. Just me, my land, and blessed silence. The property had been independent for over 80 years, according to the deed. The original owner had been a cattle rancher who bought the land long before any of the surrounding development happened. When they built the gated community next door about 15 years ago, they called it the Heights, and it became home to executives, doctors, and lawyers who wanted their own little slice of suburban perfection. I closed on the ranch on a Thursday and spent my first week just soaking it all in. The smell of cedar trees, the sound of wind through the tall grass, and that incredible feeling of finally being free from neighbors. I could walk outside in my underwear if I wanted to. I could play music at whatever volume I chose. I could let my lawn grow wild or plant a garden wherever I felt like it. It was absolute paradise. That first week, I barely saw another human being. I unpacked boxes, set up my home office, and started planning where I might put a workshop or maybe even a small barn someday. I waved at a few people driving past on the main road, but mostly it was just me and the wildlife. I should have known it was too good to last. The invasion came on a Tuesday morning during my second week. I was drinking coffee on the front porch when I heard the crunch of gravel on my private road. A white Lexus SUV was driving up my driveway like the driver owned the place. The woman who got out was exactly what you'd picture if someone said, HOA President. Perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive workout clothes that had never seen actual exercise, and an expression like she smelled something unpleasant. She had a clipboard in one hand and a manila folder in the other. She didn't introduce herself, didn't say hello, just marched up to my porch like she was conducting a military inspection. "You must be the new owner," she announced. "I'm the president of the Heights Community Association. I brought your welcome information." She handed me the manila folder. I opened it expecting maybe a local restaurant guide or information about trash pickup. Instead, I found a bill, a big one. The paper was printed on fancy letterhead with the Heights Community Association at the top. Below that, in bold letters, it said, "Outstanding balance due." The amount made me blink twice. $100,000. There must be some mistake, I said, looking at the bill again. I just bought this property. I've never been a member of any HOA. The woman, who I'll call President Brenda since that's what her business card said, gave me a look like I was a particularly slow child. "Ignorance isn't a legal defense," she said. "These are accrued unpaid dues and interest from the previous owner. The Heights has jurisdiction over all land within a 5-mile radius. That includes your property." I read the bill more carefully. It listed monthly dues going back 7 years, plus late fees, interest, and something called special assessments for community improvements. The math was creative, to say the least. "I need to see the master deed and the CC and Rs," I said. "If my property is part of your association, there should be legal documentation proving it was annexed." Brenda's perfect smile faltered for just a second. Then she pointed at my fields with her manicured finger. "Look at this place," she said. "These unkempt fields are bringing down property values for the entire area. We expect the lawn mowed to 3 inches by Monday, and that fence needs to be white vinyl, not this rustic wood nonsense." I stayed calm, which seemed to irritate her more than if I had yelled. "I'll need to see the legal documents before I can consider any payments," I repeated. "Surely you have the paperwork showing when my property was annexed into the Heights." "Check the bylaws," she snapped. It's all there, and just so you know, if we don't receive the first 20,000 by Friday, we'll be placing a lien on your property. She turned to leave, then paused at her car door. Welcome to the neighborhood, she said, though her tone suggested I was anything but welcome. I watched her drive away, then looked at the bill again. Something about the whole interaction felt off. In my line of work, you learn to spot when someone is trying to sell you something that doesn't exist, and President Brenda had been selling hard. I called my real estate attorney that afternoon. He'd handled the property purchase and knew the title history better than anyone. Are you sure about the jurisdiction claim? I asked him. This HOA president seems pretty confident. Let me pull the file, he said. I could hear papers rustling. Your property has been independent since 1943. There's no record of any HOA annexation. In fact, for them to have jurisdiction, you would have had to agree to it in writing, and there would be specific deed restrictions recorded with the county. So what's this bill about? Sounds like someone's fishing, he said. But let me do some digging. HOAs can't just claim territory like they're planting a flag. There are very specific legal procedures for annexation. While I waited for my attorney to investigate, I decided to do some research of my own. I drove around the Heights, observing the community that apparently wanted me to pay them $100,000. It was exactly what you'd expect from a high-end gated community. Perfect lawns, matching mailboxes, and houses that looked like they came from the same catalog. The type of place where the trash cans probably had to be a specific color and size. I parked at a coffee shop just outside their main entrance and watched the residents come and go. Everyone drove luxury cars and looked like they shopped at the same few stores. It was the kind of manufactured perfection that made my skin crawl. On Thursday, my attorney called back with interesting news. I found something, he said. The Heights HOA did try to annex your property about 5 years ago. The previous owner was in a nursing home by then, and his kids had power of attorney. But here's the thing, they never completed the legal filing. What does that mean? It means they started the paperwork but never finished it. There's no recorded deed restriction, no signed agreement, nothing legally binding. As far as the law is concerned, your property was never part of their HOA. I felt a surge of satisfaction. So this bill is completely bogus. Completely, but here's what's interesting. I think they've been faking jurisdiction to scare off potential buyers. Your realtor mentioned the property had been on and off the market for 2 years before you bought it. I bet this HOA nonsense is why. That explained the quick estate sale and the below-market price. The family probably got tired of dealing with HOA harassment and just wanted to sell and be done with it. Friday morning came and went without any payment from me. I figured that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. On Saturday, I woke up to the sound of lawnmowers. Not one lawnmower, several. I looked out my bedroom window and saw 3 men in matching uniforms cutting my front field with commercial mowers. I threw on clothes and ran outside. Hey! I shouted over the noise. What are you doing? The closest worker shut off his mower. We're from the community landscaping crew. We're here to bring this property into compliance. This is private property. I didn't hire you. The man looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, we were told by the HOA president that this area was designated as Common Area B and needed immediate maintenance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were mowing my field and calling it Common Area. Get off my property, I said. Right now. We can't just leave in the middle of a job, the worker said. We have our orders. I pulled out my phone and called 911. While I was on hold, a familiar white Lexus came speeding up my driveway. President Brenda jumped out of her car before it had fully stopped. There's no need for dramatics, she called out. We're simply maintaining community standards. You're trespassing on private property, I said, still on hold with the police dispatcher. This is Common Area B, Brenda replied smoothly. According to our records, this front section of your lot is designated community space. The police arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers got out of their patrol car and surveyed the scene. 3 landscapers with mowers, 1 angry HOA president, and me holding a phone with a 911 dispatcher still on the line. What seems to be the problem here? The older officer asked. I started to explain, but Brenda cut me off. She pulled a folder from her car and handed the officer a document. Officer, this woman is interfering with authorized community maintenance, she said. This area is clearly designated as Common Area B in our community bylaws. The officer looked at the paper. I couldn't see what it said, but something about his expression told me it wasn't as official as Brenda was pretending. Ma'am, the officer said to me, do you have proof that this is your property? I showed him my deed and the recent closing documents. The officer compared them to Brenda's paper, then asked her a question that made my day. "This document isn't notarized," he said, "and there's no county recording stamp. Is this an official legal document?" Brenda's confident expression cracked slightly. "It's from our community records. We maintain our own documentation for common areas." "So you're saying you authorized these workers to come onto her property?" "I authorized maintenance of community common area, yes." The officer looked at her for a long moment, then turned to the landscaping crew. "You gentlemen need to pack up and leave," he said. "This appears to be a civil dispute over property boundaries, and until it's resolved in court, no one should be doing unauthorized work here." After the police left and the mowers were loaded back onto trucks, I was left alone with President Brenda and my phone, which had been recording the entire conversation. "This isn't over," she said, getting back into her Lexus. "No," I agreed, "it's not. But I wasn't planning to be on the defensive much longer." That afternoon, I called my attorney again and told him about the morning's events. His reaction was immediate. "They're committing slander of title," he said. "By claiming your property as common area, they're creating a false cloud on your ownership rights. That's a serious legal issue." "What about the trespassing?" "That too. And if they're doing this systematically to scare off buyers, we might be looking at fraud." I decided it was time to go on the offensive, but I wasn't going to hire just any lawyer. I needed someone who specialized in exactly this type of property dispute. I found a land use and title attorney about an hour away who had excellent reviews and extensive experience with HOA overreach cases. Her name was Ms. Roberts, and when I explained my situation, she was immediately interested. "HO, as that claim territory they don't actually control are one of my pet peeves," she said during our first phone call. "They rely on people being too intimidated or too broke to fight back." "What's our first step?" "We're going to do a complete chain of title audit," she said. "I want to see every document related to your property going back to the original land grants, and then we're going to demand that they prove their claim with actual legal documentation." "What are the chances they can actually prove jurisdiction?" "Based on what you've told me, 0. But I want to make absolutely sure before we proceed." Ms. Roberts was thorough. Over the next 2 weeks, she pulled every property record, surveyed the original boundary markers, and researched the complete history of both my ranch and the Heights development. Her findings were damning for the HOA. "Your property has been continuously independent since 1943, she reported. "There's no legal mechanism by which the Heights could have gained jurisdiction. The attempted annexation 5 years ago was never completed, never filed with the county, and never signed by the property owner. So what happens now? Now we send them a demand for proof of debt," she said. "We're going to require them to provide legal documentation supporting their $100,000 claim. When they can't, we'll have grounds for our own legal action." The certified letter went out on a Wednesday. It was beautifully written in precise legal language that essentially said, "Prove it or shut up." Ms. Roberts demanded copies of the master deed, the CC and Rs, the annexation agreement, and any other documents that would support their claim to my property. The deadline for their response was 2 weeks. They didn't respond. Instead, something interesting happened. I started getting phone calls from residents of the Heights. Apparently, word was spreading through the community that their HOA was involved in some kind of property dispute that could affect everyone. The first call was from a woman who lived near the main entrance. "I heard there might be legal issues with the association," she said. "My husband and I are concerned about potential special assessments if there's a lawsuit." I didn't want to discuss details with random neighbors, but I did ask her a question that had been bugging me. "Has your HOA been doing any major construction or improvements lately?" "Oh yes," she said immediately. "They just finished this gorgeous new clubhouse with a resort-style pool. It cost way more than budgeted, but the board said they had found additional revenue sources to cover the overage." Additional revenue sources, like a fake $100,000 bill to someone who didn't owe them anything. I called Ms. Roberts with this new information. "That confirms what I suspected," she said. "They've already spent money they don't have, counting on your fake debt to cover their expenses. That makes them desperate, which makes them dangerous." "What do you mean, dangerous?" "Desperate people make poor decisions. If they're in financial trouble, they might escalate rather than back down." She was right about the escalation part. The next week, I came home from a grocery run to find a new sign posted at the end of my driveway. It was professional looking, mounted on metal posts and clearly visible from the main road. Notice, Community Common Area B. No private vehicles. Violators will be towed by order of the Heights HOA Board. I called the police again but got the same response. Civil dispute, nothing they could do unless someone was physically preventing me from accessing my own property. But President Brenda wasn't done with her psychological warfare campaign. A few days later, I found a different kind of notice. This one was tucked into my mailbox, a violation notice claiming I was in breach of community standards for having unauthorized livestock on the property. I didn't have any livestock. I barely had houseplants. The violation notice threatened fines of $500 per day until the livestock was removed. It also mentioned that failure to pay fines would result in additional liens on the property. I took pictures of everything and sent them to Ms. Roberts. "They're really reaching now," she said. "Fake violation notices for imaginary livestock. This is harassment, plain and simple." "What's our next move?" "I think it's time to invite them to a settlement conference," she said. "Let's see how confident they are when they have to sit across a table from us and defend their position." Ms. Roberts drafted an invitation to what she called a good faith settlement meeting to be held at my ranch. She sent it certified mail to President Brenda and the entire HOA board. The letter was polite but firm. We invited them to bring all documentation supporting their claim to my property, and we would present our evidence of clear title. The goal, according to the letter, was to resolve the dispute without expensive litigation. I wasn't expecting them to actually show up, but 3 days later my phone rang. "This is President Brenda from the Heights Community Association," the voice said. "We received your attorney's letter about a settlement meeting." "Good," I said. "Are you planning to attend?" "We'll be there," she said. "But I want to make it clear that our position hasn't changed. Your property owes substantial back dues, and we intend to collect them." "Bring your documentation," I said. "We'll have ours." The meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday at 2 o'clock. Ms. Roberts drove out Friday evening so we could prepare. "Remember," she said as we reviewed our strategy, "the goal isn't just to prove they're wrong. The goal is to make sure they never try this again with anyone else." Saturday afternoon, I watched from my front window as 3 cars pulled up my driveway. President Brenda was driving the lead car, a black BMW this time instead of her usual Lexus. Behind her were 2 other board members I didn't recognize. Ms. Roberts met them at the front door with professional courtesy and a briefcase full of documents. We sat around my kitchen table like we were negotiating a corporate merger instead of discussing a property dispute. President Brenda had brought her own folder, which she placed prominently in front of her. "Before we begin," Ms. Roberts said, "I'd like to see the legal documentation supporting the Heights claim to jurisdiction over my client's property." President Brenda opened her folder and pulled out the same paper the police officer had questioned days earlier, the one with no notary seal and no county recording stamp. "This is our internal documentation showing the property boundaries for Common Area B," she said. Ms. Roberts examined the paper for about 30 seconds, then set it aside. "This document has no legal standing," she said calmly. "It's not recorded with the county, it's not notarized, and it appears to be created on standard office software. Do you have any other documentation?" One of the other board members, an older man in an expensive suit, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss a reasonable payment plan," he said. "We understand the full amount might be difficult to manage all at once." Ms. Roberts smiled in a way that made me glad she was on my side. "Let me show you what actual legal documentation looks like," she said. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers about 3 inches thick, county records, survey maps, deed histories, and title insurance policies. Everything properly stamped, recorded, and notarized. "This is the complete chain of title for this property," she said. "It shows continuous independent ownership since 1943. At no point was this land ever part of the Heights development or subject to any HOA jurisdiction." She spread the documents across the table like a winning poker hand. "Now," she continued, "let me show you what your attempted annexation looks like." She pulled out another set of papers, copies of the incomplete annexation attempt from 5 years earlier. "Your predecessor board started annexation paperwork in 2019, she said, "but they never completed the process. There's no signed agreement from the property owner, no recorded deed restriction, and no legal mechanism by which you gained jurisdiction." President Brenda was staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. Furthermore, Ms. Roberts continued, by claiming this property as common area and attempting to perform unauthorized maintenance, your association has committed slander of title and trespassing. The expensive suit guy was looking increasingly uncomfortable. What exactly are you saying? He asked. I'm saying that your association has been engaged in fraudulent activity, Ms. Roberts said matter-of-factly. You've been billing for services never provided, claiming jurisdiction you don't possess, and attempting to place liens on property you have no legal claim to. She pulled out one more document, a summary of the Heights' recent financial activities. I also took the liberty of researching your association's recent expenditures, she said. It appears you've recently completed a clubhouse renovation that was significantly over budget. The timing suggests you were counting on my client's fake debt to cover the shortfall. Now President Brenda looked genuinely nervous. We acted in good faith based on our records, she said. No, Ms. Roberts replied. You acted in bad faith based on documents you knew were inadequate. The question now is how we resolve this without destroying your association's financial stability. She leaned back in her chair and delivered what I would later recognize as the killing blow. My client is prepared to file suit for fraud, slander of title, and harassment, she said. The potential damages could easily exceed $500,000. That would bankrupt your association and trigger massive special assessments for every homeowner in the Heights. The three board members exchanged glances that told me everything I needed to know. They were trapped and they knew it. However, Ms. Roberts continued, my client is also reasonable. We're prepared to offer a settlement that protects both parties. She pulled out a pre-written agreement and placed it in the center of the table. The Heights Community Association will pay $25,000 in legal fees and damages for the landscape destruction, she read. In exchange, my client agrees not to pursue fraud charges provided the association signs a permanent covenant of non-interference. President Brenda picked up the settlement agreement and read it carefully. $25,000, she said. That's outrageous. That's generous, Ms. Roberts corrected. The alternative is a lawsuit that will cost you far more than $25,000 plus the risk of individual board member liability for knowingly fraudulent claims. The expensive suit guy leaned over and whispered something to President Brenda. She whispered back. The third board member, who hadn't spoken during the entire meeting, just looked like he wanted to disappear. We need to discuss this with the full board, President Brenda finally said. You have until Monday, Ms. Roberts replied. After that, we file suit. They packed up their inadequate documents and left without saying goodbye. I watched their cars disappear down my driveway, then turned to Ms. Roberts. Do you think they'll take the settlement? They don't have a choice, she said. The only question is whether they're smart enough to realize it. Monday morning, my phone rang at exactly 9 o'clock. This is President Brenda, the voice said, though she sounded much less confident than in previous calls. The board has voted to accept your settlement terms. Excellent, I said. When can you have the funds and signed agreements ready? We'll need a few days to arrange the payment, she said, but the documents can be signed this afternoon. Ms. Roberts handled the paperwork exchange. By Wednesday, I had a check for $25,000 and a legally binding agreement that the Heights Community Association would never again claim jurisdiction over my property or interfere with my use of it. But the story doesn't end there. About a month later, I was checking my mail when a car pulled up to my mailbox. It was a resident from the Heights, a middle-aged woman I'd never seen before. Excuse me, she called out. Are you the owner of this ranch? I walked over to her car, wondering what she wanted. I'm sorry to bother you, she said, but I wanted to thank you. Thank me for what? For exposing what our HOA board was doing, she said. After word got around about your situation, several of us started asking questions about where our dues were going and what authority the board actually had. She told me that President Brenda had been voted out in an emergency election the previous week. Apparently, when the homeowners learned that their association had paid $25,000 to settle a fraudulent claim, they demanded her resignation. It turns out this wasn't the first time, the woman continued. She'd been making up violations and charging fines to people she didn't like. Your case just happened to be big enough that she couldn't hide it. I used part of the settlement money to build a proper security gate at the end of my driveway. It's a beautiful wrought iron gate with stone pillars and an electronic keypad, but the best part is the sign mounted next to it. Private property, not part of the Heights. HOA trespassers will be prosecuted. I had it made by a professional sign company in letters large enough to be read from the main road. These days I sit on my porch in the mornings with my coffee and enjoy the absolute silence. No HOA meetings, no violation notices, no neighbors complaining about my grass height. Just me, my 50 acres, and the peace I paid for. Sometimes I see cars slow down when they pass my gate, probably reading the sign. I like to think I'm saving some future property buyer the trouble I went through. The funny thing is, President Brenda still drives past my property occasionally. I saw her just last week in a different car. Apparently she had to downsize after the HOA debacle damaged her reputation in the community. She doesn't make eye contact anymore. I've heard through local connections that she's moved to a smaller house outside the Heights. Turns out, when you make enemies of your own neighbors, living in the same community becomes awkward. The new HOA board sent me a formal apology letter about 6 months after the settlement. They also included a gift card to a local restaurant, which I thought was a nice touch. Apparently, the new leadership wants to make sure everyone knows they're nothing like their predecessor. My attorney, Ms. Roberts, has used our case as an example in several presentations about HOA overreach. She tells me it's become something of a cautionary tale in property law circles. The problem, she explained to me once, is that some HOA boards think they're running little kingdoms instead of community organizations. Your case shows what happens when someone actually fights back with proper legal representation. I've been contacted by 3 other property owners in different states who found themselves in similar situations. Apparently, the fake jurisdiction scam is more common than I realized. I referred them all to lawyers who specialize in property rights, and from what I hear, they all achieved favorable settlements. Looking back, I realize how lucky I was to have the resources to fight back. Most people probably would have either paid the bogus bill or walked away from their property purchase entirely. That's exactly what these fraudulent HOAs count on. The best revenge, though, isn't the money or the legal victory. It's the simple fact that I'm still here, living exactly the way I want to live on my own land. Every morning when I walk outside and see nothing but fields and sky, I'm reminded that some things are worth fighting for. My property value has actually increased since the HOA dispute was resolved. Turns out having clear, undisputed title and a legal guarantee of no HOA interference makes ranch properties more attractive to buyers, not less. I've also discovered that my neighbors in the Heights aren't all terrible people. Several of them have stopped by over the months to introduce themselves properly and apologize for their former board's behavior. A few have even mentioned they're jealous of my independence from association rules. One neighbor, a retired engineer, told me he's considering selling his house in the Heights and looking for his own piece of unrestricted land. 20 years of being told what color my shutters can be is 20 years too long, he said. As I finish writing this, it's been almost a year since I bought my ranch. The fight with the HOA feels like ancient history now, but I know it shaped how I think about property rights and standing up to bullies. The most important lesson I learned is that official-looking documents and confident assertions don't necessarily mean anything if they're not backed by actual law. Too many people get intimidated by legal-sounding language and assume the other party must be right. In my case, a little investigation and the right legal help turned a $100,000 problem into a $25,000 victory. If you're facing something similar, my advice is simple. Don't pay anything until you've seen the actual legal documents. Get your own attorney who specializes in property law, and remember that HOAs are just groups of people. They're not above the law, no matter how much they might act like it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some coffee to drink and some beautiful silence to enjoy. From my porch, where my grass can be whatever height I want it to be, and my fence can be whatever color makes me happy. Freedom is expensive, but it's worth every penny. The next one is a malicious compliance story. It seems that you people love my malicious compliance truck stories, all of which are true, and this one will be no different. In this episode, I am driving the twin-stick R-model Mack boom truck, the largest in our fleet. This truck was big, heavy, and it had unusually wide turning radius. At that time, I delivered construction materials, while we had residential and commercial materials. I often focused on new construction and commercial sites due to the truck being so large. Every once in a while I would get a residential delivery. Mostly these deliveries I could make from the street without having to pull on the property. This is not one of those stories. So, this one day I am told I am doing a residential roofing delivery to the roof of the house. My radar is now on because I am familiar with the roads in that area and they are narrow. Delivery to the roof means I have to enter the property and get right up to the house. I get loaded and get to the job. As I approach the job site, the road is narrow, barely 20 feet wide. The house is on my left and facing the property, the driveway is on the left. Important in a second. I stop and go find the person in charge. He says, "You're right on time, I need you in the driveway," and boom, across the roof. I say, "That's great, but there are several issues. One, all the vehicles parked on the street need move down past the neighbor's house for me to fit down this road. Two, I cannot make the turn from the street onto the driveway without driving across the lawn, backing up 2 or 3 times. Three, I cannot guarantee that driveway can support the weight." He shouts, "I'll move the trucks and you just get your truck in here," in a very demeaning tone. I say, "Okay, I will." As I back down the street to the intersection, turn around, and back up the road, he gets all the trucks moved. I get into position to pull on the property and stop. I grab my clipboard and jump out. I walk up to him and say, "I need you to sign this. We carry legal forms in the trucks that when signed makes the signee or their company responsible for any damage to the property, truck, load, or towing fees to get the truck off site." He signs and all but throws the clipboard at me. Well, okay then. Game on. I turn into the yard and pull across the driveway and back up 4 times to get the truck completely on asphalt. Once in the best position I could get, I got out and looked at my handiwork. 8-inch ruts all across the front 29 feet of yard from the street. Each edge where the tires went from grass to asphalt or asphalt to grass, the driveway collapsed and the and broke away. The rest of the driveway had several 6-inch ruts that were at least a foot wide on most of the driveway. But I am not done yet. I have to put down my outriggers to stabilize the boom. Because the driveway was as wide as the truck meant that when I put them down, they would be in the lawn. I carried large blocks to enlarge the footprint of the outriggers to get stability on soft ground. This left 2 more 10-inch holes in the yard, about 3 foot by 4 foot square. I delivered the entire load with no issue. Then the homeowner came home as I was climbing off the boom and started screaming at me for the state of his driveway and yard. I calmly turned and pointed to the job foreman and said, "You need to talk to him." Then turned back around and finished wrapping up the truck. I could hear them as they were screaming at each other but could not understand what they were saying. The final insult, I had to ask them both to move their vehicles so I could back out. And yes, more ruts were made leaving. I paused on the street for a minute to check out my handiwork. It was bad. I got back to the warehouse and the bosses cornered me before I could get into the office. The contractor's boss, Gad, blown up my boss's phone with threats and complaints. I quickly explained and pulled out the signed affidavit. Boss said, "Well, okay then, we're covered," and I heard nothing more about it. That affidavit has saved my ass a lot over the years and has afforded me some great and funny, malicious compliance over the years. The next one is an entitled People Story. This story took place when I was working in a very famous chain chicken restaurant while in college. It was a very busy Friday night with a lobby full of people waiting to order, a drive-through line that wrapped around the building, and a full dining room. Enter the Karen. She ordered a large family-sized bucket of chicken with all the typical containers of sides such as mashed potatoes and biscuits, etc. She ordered the whole lot to go, took her bags, got in her car, and drove away. Normally that'd be the end of the interaction, but sadly this was only the beginning. About an hour later, the restaurant's phone rang and I, being the shift supervisor, answered the phone. It's the large meal Karen on the other end of the phone. She immediately launched into a shrieking tirade about how her food was ice cold and soggy when she got home. I quickly apologized for her inconvenience and offered her a coupon for a discount on her next purchase. I foolishly thought that the problem has been solved, but there was so much more to come. Jump ahead to the very next Friday night. The exact same chain of events occurs with large meal Karen. She came in, ordered her feast, took her bags, got in her car, and drove away. An hour later, she called the restaurant for the second busy Friday in a row to keep an employee tied up on the phone with her cussing rant. Her food was cold and soggy. She demands compensation. She wants to talk to the owner, blah, blah. For the second week in a row, I apologize for the inconvenience and offer her a discount on her next visit. Problem solved again, but this time I inform the store manager about the ongoing drama with this lady. Wait for it. The very next Friday, for the third week in a row, our large meal Karen returned. As soon as I saw her walk into the lobby, I got my store manager to come up front and wait on her. She was prattling on about the disappointing service and poor quality before it was even her turn at the register. She ordered her usual haul, got her discount from the previous week, took her bag, and drove away. You guessed it. The restaurant's phone rung over an hour later, and it's cold chicken Karen. She wants to talk to the manager, she wants gas money, she wants free food, she wants firstborn children, yada yada. She screeched at me that once again her food was ice cold when she got home. You idiots don't know how to pack food. This happens every time. As I am trying to apologize to her and calm her down, she screamed in my ear that I am too stupid and she wants the real boss. I pass the phone to the store manager, who lets her foam at the mouth and rant for what seemed like an eternity. Once Karen ran out of breath and my boss could get a word in, he asked her one simple question. "Ma'am, where do you live?" Karen replied with the name of her town like it was no big deal. My boss looked simultaneously shocked and ticked off. Then he loudly said, "Ma'am, that town is over 1 hour's drive from this building, and it's an absolutely ridiculous expectation to think that your food would be perfectly hot when you get home. You cannot possibly think that you're going to transport hot food for over an hour in below freezing winter temperatures and it's still going to be hot." This idiotic Karen was not having it. She demanded more free food, gas money, and coupons. I could hear her howler monkey screeches as my boss held the phone away from his ear. Then he went nuclear. He raised his voice right back at her and told her, "Absolutely none of that will be happening. And furthermore, we will not tolerate any more of this disruption to our business every week. Consider yourself permanently banned from this location. If you come back, we will refuse to serve you, call the police, and have you removed from the property." Then he slammed the phone down right in her face as she continued to screech on the other end. Luckily for us, she must have found another place to get her Friday night feast. We never saw her again after that, thank all the chicken gods. Anyway, thank you for watching.